Nathaniel Cole arrived too late. The grave had already been filled. The earth had already been smoothed flat. The wooden marker already stood in place, bearing his mother's name and the dates that marked her life. He sat on his horse at the edge of the cemetery, staring at the fresh dirt, his chest tight like something had been locked inside it, and the key thrown away. 8 years. He had been gone 8 long years, and now this was all that was left. The ride into Copper Hollow had taken 3 days. 3 days of hard miles from the Montana plains down into Arizona territory. The horse beneath him was worn thin, its dark coat damp with sweat, despite the cool November air. Nathaniel felt no better. His body ached in places he had forgotten could ache. His hands were blistered through his gloves. His back burned with every breath. None of it compared to the weight pressing down on his heart. The telegram was still folded in his pocket, soft from being handled too many times. He did not need to read it again. He knew every word. Mother passed Tuesday morning. Funeral Saturday. Come home. He had ridden as fast as he could, but it had not been fast enough. He had failed her one last time. Copper Hollow looked the same as it had when he left. Weathered buildings huddled around the main road, the white church steeple rising above them, sharp against the sky like an accusing finger. Autumn painted the land in gold and rust, the air crisp and clean. The mountains stood watched the way they always had. Nathaniel stopped at the ridge above town and looked down. His hands shook on the reins. This place held every memory he had tried to outrun. His childhood, his brother's laughter, his father's anger, his mother's quiet strength. "Well, Blue," he murmured to the horse. "This is it." The horse flicked an ear, but did not move. Nathaniel envied that simple loyalty. Horses did not ask why you left. They just carried you where you chose to go. He was 31 years old and felt far older. 8 years of drifting from job to job, ranch work, cattle drives, a deputy's badge that had ended in trouble, mining camps where men lost themselves chasing money they never found. 8 years of telling himself he had made the right choice the night he rode away from Copper Hollow with anger burning in his chest. Now his mother was gone, and the guilt sat in his stomach like stone. He rode through town without stopping, past the mercantile, past the feed store, past faces he did not yet want to meet. The road west led to the Cole homestead 2 miles from town, tucked into a valley where Pine Creek ran year-round. The gate still stood, weathered, crooked, familiar. Nathaniel dismounted to open it, his legs stiff and unsteady. The hinges screamed in protest. He led the horse through and closed the gate behind them, then stood there staring up the long drive. The house looked tired. The barn sagged. The fences leaned. The yard felt empty in a way that went deeper than neglect. This place had been waiting, and waiting had worn it down. He rode up to the porch and dismounted, tying the horse to the post. The rocking chair sat empty, where his mother used to sit in the evenings, shelling peas or watching the sun slip behind the hills. The sight of it hit him harder than the grave had. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. His mother never locked doors. Inside, the house smelled of dust, old wood, and memories. Everything looked the same. The rug by the door, the clock on the mantel, his mother's sewing basket beside her chair, the Bible on the side table, its leather worn, soft by years of use. Everything was the same except the one person who mattered. "Hello." His voice came out rough. Silence answered. He moved through the rooms slowly. The kitchen where she had taught him to make biscuits. The hallway where height marks still showed him growing taller than his brother before sickness stole Samuel away. His parents' bedroom was neatly kept as if his father might return any moment, though he had been gone for years. At last, he opened the door to his own room. Nothing had changed. The bed was still unmade from the night he left. His clothes still hung on the pegs. The wooden horse his brother had carved sat on the windowsill. His mother had kept it exactly as it was, a shrine to a son who never came home. Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed, hat clutched in his hands, and finally broke. Tears came hard and fast. He cried for his mother, for his brother, for his father, for the boy he had been and the man he had become, for the years that could never be reclaimed. When the tears finally stopped, he felt hollow. He went back outside to tend the horse, needing the work to keep from drowning in thought. He unsaddled, rubbed the animal down, and fed it hay and water. The sun was sinking when he heard wagon wheels on the drive. Nathaniel turned, his body tensing out of habit. A single horse pulled a simple wagon. A woman sat on the seat, reins in hand. She slowed when she saw him and brought the wagon to a stop a short distance away. She climbed down with easy confidence. Her dress was plain blue, her hair pinned beneath a bonnet, her face calm, steady, kind. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Nathaniel Cole." "That's right," he replied. "My name is Clara Bennett," she said gently. "I brought some food. Your mother would not have wanted you arriving to an empty house." Something in her voice made his chest tighten, and without knowing why, Nathaniel realized this woman would change everything. Clara Bennett did not wait for him to invite her closer. She turned back to the wagon and lifted a large basket from the bed, heavy enough that Nathaniel stepped forward without thinking and took it from her hands. Bread wrapped in cloth, jars of preserves, potatoes, eggs, a small ham tied in twine. More food than one man could eat in days. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "No," she replied, "but your mother was kind to me, very kind." The way she said it told him there was more to that sentence than she was sharing. Nathaniel set the basket on the porch steps. "You knew her well." Clara nodded. "These last 2 years especially, I came out twice a week, sometimes more near the end. I helped with the garden, the heavier chores, and kept her company. She didn't like being alone after your father passed." Guilt cut deep and sharp. His mother had needed help, and he had been miles away, pretending he did not hear the pull of home. "She spoke about you often," Clara added. "She hoped you would come back someday." Nathaniel swallowed hard. Did she suffer? Clara shook her head gently. No, it was her heart. She went to sleep and didn't wake. It was peaceful, I promise. Relief and grief collided inside him. His knees nearly buckled. "Thank you," he whispered. Clara watched him for a moment, then turned toward the wagon. "I should go. I just wanted to make sure you were not alone tonight." "Wait," he said, surprised by the urgency in his own voice. "Will I see you again?" She paused and looked back at him, something curious passing across her face. "Copper Hollow is small. We tend to cross paths." "I'd like to thank you properly," he said, "for helping my mother." "You can start by taking care of yourself," she replied. "You look worn thin." Then she climbed back into the wagon and drove away, leaving Nathaniel standing on the porch with food at his feet and questions filling his mind. That night, the house felt impossibly quiet. After eating a little, Nathaniel wandered through the rooms again. In his mother's bedroom, he found a stack of letters tied with ribbon. His letters, everyone he had sent over 8 years, carefully saved. In the drawer beneath them lay a sealed envelope with his name written in her careful hand. He opened it with shaking fingers. Her words poured over him like a final embrace. She loved him. She understood why he left. She forgave him and asked him to forgive himself. She left the ranch to him and urged him to give Copper Hollow a chance. And she wrote about Clara Bennett. She called her a gift, a woman with healing hands and a generous heart, someone worth knowing, someone who made a place feel like home. Nathaniel sat at the table until the lamp burned low, his mother's letter pressed to his chest. The next morning, he went to the cemetery. He stood before 3 graves, his brother, his father, his mother. He spoke to them quietly, words meant for no one else, apologies, promises, grief long buried, and finally released. When he turned to leave, Clara was there. She stood a few paces away, holding small bundles of dried flowers. "I come most mornings," she said softly. "Your mother asked me to tend the graves." Together they placed flowers and stood in silence. Clara did not rush him. She seemed to understand that grief needed space. "She would have been glad you came," Clara said at last. "I hope so." They walked back toward town talking quietly. Clara spoke of her father, a doctor who had taught her medicine before passing. She spoke of her husband, lost in a mining accident only months after their wedding. Nathaniel listened, feeling the familiar ache of shared loss. Later that day, he saw her again. She came rushing through town, breathless, a medical bag clutched in her hand. "I need help," she said. "A woman is in labor. The doctor is away." Nathaniel did not hesitate. He followed her without question. For hours, he did what she told him, held hands, carried water, kept panic at bay while Clara worked with calm precision. When the baby finally cried, Nathaniel felt something shift inside him, life arriving in the middle of sorrow. When they stepped back into the evening air, Clara looked exhausted and radiant all at once. "You saved them," Nathaniel said. "We saved them," she replied. Sunday came. Nathaniel stood in the church, nervous and uncertain until he felt someone sit beside him. Clara. They shared a hymn, their shoulders brushed. It felt like an anchor in unfamiliar waters. After the service, the town greeted him cautiously but kindly, and Clara stayed near, steady and reassuring. When a horse spooked outside the church, Nathaniel moved without thinking. He calmed the animal, soothed its fear. Clara watched him with quiet admiration. "Dinner," she said afterward. "Would you like company?" He did. At the ranch, they shared a simple meal and long conversation. They spoke of dreams, regrets, and the weight of expectations. Before she left, Clara asked, "There's a harvest dance next Saturday. Would you go with me?" Nathaniel felt his heart stumble. "I would like that." At the dance under lantern light, they moved awkwardly at first, then found their rhythm. When the music slowed, Nathaniel gathered his courage. "I'm thinking about staying," he said. Clara met his gaze. "I hoped you would." He realized then that he was no longer just home for a funeral. He was home because something here was asking him to stay. The weeks after the harvest dance changed Nathaniel Cole in ways he had not expected. He stopped waking with the restless urge to leave. The ranch began to feel less like a burden and more like a responsibility worth carrying. Each morning he rose before dawn, repaired fences, cleared brush, and worked the land the way his father once had, only without the anger. The work grounded him. It gave shape to his days, and Clara Bennett became the steady center of those days. They did not rush things. They walked together after church, shared quiet dinners, and rode through the hills when the weather allowed. They spoke honestly, sometimes painfully so, about loss and fear, and the kind of future neither had thought possible anymore. Nathaniel learned how much Clara carried, how she worked day and night tending the sick, how she had quietly held the town together after her husband and father died, how she kept going when it would have been easier to leave. "You don't ever get tired of being strong?" he asked once. Clara smiled sadly. "Strength isn't a choice. It's what's left when everything else is gone." It was early winter when trouble came. Dr. Pritchard began missing calls, arriving late, smelling of whiskey. Clara covered for him at first, fixing his mistakes, keeping people safe. She did not want the town left without care. Then one night, a woman nearly died. Clara saved her. The town gathered days later in the community hall. Voices rose. Stories spilled out. Lives Clara had saved. Moments she had stood where others had failed. Nathaniel sat beside her, her hand clenched in his as the vote was taken. Clara Bennett was named Copper Hollow's physician. She cried openly, then overwhelmed and humbled, and Nathaniel pulled her into his arms. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. That night, under the cold stars, She kissed him for the first time. It was gentle, certain, full of promise. "I love you," she said simply. Nathaniel felt something settle deep inside his chest. "I love you too." They married in spring. The wildflowers bloomed across the valley, and the town gathered at the little white church. Nathaniel watched Clara walk toward him, radiant and steady, and knew every mile of wandering had led him here. They built a life with purpose. Clara opened a proper clinic. Nathaniel rebuilt the ranch. They worked side by side, supporting each other's callings. They argued sometimes, worried often, loved fiercely. A year later, their son was born. They named him Samuel James. Nathaniel held the child and felt the past and future fold together into something whole. Years passed. Children filled the house with noise and laughter. Clara's work became a legacy. Nathaniel's ranch prospered. Copper Hollow grew around them, shaped by care and commitment. One autumn evening, many years later, Nathaniel stood on the porch with Clara beside him, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. "Do you ever regret staying?" she asked. He shook his head. Leaving was easy. Staying was brave. He looked at the land, the house, the woman who had met him when he was broken and shown him how to believe again. Nathaniel Cole had ridden home for a funeral. He stayed for love, and he never ran again. The years that followed did not rush forward. They moved at the steady pace of seasons that knew their time would come. Copper Hollow did not change overnight, and neither did Nathaniel Cole. Healing did not arrive all at once. It came in small moments, in mornings spent working the land, in evenings listening to Clara move through the house in the slow realization that staying no longer felt like punishment. Nathaniel still thought about the road sometimes, about the freedom of movement and the ease of disappearing. But those thoughts no longer carried the same pull. They felt distant, like memories belonging to another man. The man he had been before he came home broken and too late. Clara Bennett became the heart of the town in ways no one could have predicted. She never asked to be admired. She never sought authority. She simply showed up day after day, night after night, for births and deaths, for sickness and injury, for fear and hope. People trusted her because she listened, because she stayed, because she treated each life like it mattered. Nathaniel watched her carry that weight and learned how to carry his own. When Clara came home exhausted, he learned to be quiet. When doubt crept into her voice, he reminded her who she was. And when the past reached for him, Clara anchored him in the present without ever asking him to explain. They built their life with intention. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. Their home filled with sound, children's laughter, footsteps on wooden floors, the creak of the porch swing in the evenings. The ranch that once felt abandoned grew strong again under Nathaniel's care. Fences stood straight. Fields fed cattle. The land responded to being loved. Nathaniel returned to the cemetery every year on the anniversary of his mother's death. He went alone early in the morning when the town was quiet. He stood by her grave and spoke to her the way he never had while she lived. "I stayed," he would say. "I built something just like you hoped." He always left flowers, not just for her, but for his father and his brother, too. He had learned that forgiveness did not erase pain. It simply loosened its grip. Copper Hollow grew around them. New families arrived. Old faces passed on. Through it all, Nathaniel and Clara remained steady, present, accountable. People came to Nathaniel for help the same way they came to Clara for healing. He never turned anyone away. One evening, years after the day Nathaniel rode back into town, the two of them stood together on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The light turned the valley gold. Just as it had that first night, he returned. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Clara asked softly. Nathaniel shook his head. "I think about who I was before I stayed. I know I'm not that man anymore." She smiled and rested her head against his shoulder. "Staying was the bravest thing you ever did." He wrapped his arm around her and breathed in the familiar scent of home, the land, the house, the life they had built together. None of it perfect, all of it real. Nathaniel Cole had ridden home for his mother's funeral, believing his story was already finished. He thought he had lost his chance at belonging, thought he had nothing left to offer. Instead, he found forgiveness waiting quietly. He found purpose in work. He found love in a woman who saw him not for who he had been, but for who he could still become. He stayed, and in staying, he learned that sometimes the greatest act of courage is not leaving to survive, but remaining long enough to build something that lasts. He had come home too late to say goodbye, but he had arrived in time to begin,